In modern warfare, not every enemy has a shape. A single bullet deflected by a gust of wind can alter the entire outcome of a battle. According to the U.S. Army Ordnance Survey, 1,944, more than 38% of sniper shots on the Western Front missed their targets at ranges over 600 yards, with the primary cause listed in the statistical column as crosswind error. Wind is an element no one can see and no one can command, yet it can cause a squad to lose men, a tactical plan to bend off course, and a moment of victory to turn into casualties. In the instant a bullet leaves the barrel, a human life depends on the movement of air, the invisible enemy no map can draw. From 1939 to 1945, ballistic error remained on the list of top research priorities for military forces. According to the Royal Small Arms Committee report, 1943, more than 60% of inaccuracy in open-field sniping came from misjudging wind direction and temperature gradient along the bullet's path. Every sniper rifle of World War II, from Germany's Carabiner 98K to America's M1903A4, was tuned to perfection. But once a bullet travelled beyond 700 yards, it was no longer in the soldier's control. A light crosswind from the right flank could push a bullet off by 8 inches at 600 yards. At 1,000 yards, with just 10 miles per hour of wind, the trajectory deviated more than 1.2 feet. Those are figures no skill can overcome. Soldiers in El Alamein, Tobruk, or Normandy all understood that fear. They felt the wind on their cheeks, guessed direction from swaying grass, or watched smoke from a nearby muzzle. Techniques passed down since World War I, feeling wind, reading mirage, gauging angle deviation through distant objects remained in the 1942 training manuals. But those were instincts. According to the U.S. Marine Sniper Training Manual, 1943, such perceptual methods achieved only 30–35% effectiveness in urban or obstructed terrain. When a city became a maze of swirling air, every learned rule lost meaning. The scopes of that era, like the Soviet PU or the British No. 32 MKI, were built with 3.5 x 4x magnification, designed for range finding, not wind reading. The ballistic charts engraved on rifle stocks accounted only for bullet weight and barrel elevation. No data existed for the airflow between the shooter and target. Engineers knew that limitation well, but any solution required technology that did not yet exist: pressure sensors, devices measuring wind speed along the trajectory, or three-dimensional airflow models. All of that lay beyond the computational power of the 1,940 seconds. They had to accept wind as an uncontrollable variable. On the battlefield, that imperfection became a tangible cost, according to the U.S. Army Quartermaster Report, July 1944. During the Normandy campaign, infantry forces expended an average of 18,000 rounds per day for suppressive fire, with nearly 12% classified under waste due to ballistic dispersion. Those stray rounds did not kill the enemy, but they slowly killed logistics. Each extra supply run consumed another 500 gallons of fuel, and more men were lost along the way. Wind, error, and attrition fused into an unending cycle of consumption that stretched through the campaign. A similar phenomenon occurred in North Africa. According to the British 8th Army Logistical Summary, 1942, in just the first week of the El Alamein offensive, more than 27,000 artillery shells were fired solely for range adjustment before batteries achieved stable accuracy. Desert winds pushed 15 kg shells off by dozens of meters. The result was that fuel, metal, time, and even tactical opportunity were all carried away by the wind. That report contained a short note. Wind error exceeded training expectations. One line, yet it was an admission from an entire system. From a logistical standpoint, every missed bullet meant another ton of steel to smelt, another train to dispatch. Data from the U.S. Army Service Forces, 1944, shows that resupplying ammunition alone on the Western Front consumed over 220 million gallons of fuel each month. If every soldier had shot just 10% more accurately, the savings would have powered the entire tactical air fleet for 3 weeks. Those dry numbers reveal that error is not merely a technical flaw, it is a strategic factor. Those reports slowly turned into an obsession in the minds of ordnance engineers. They realized the problem no longer lay in power, but in refinement. Every campaign was being defeated by invisible deviations. According to the Army Ballistics Laboratory, 1,945, nearly 70, 3% of long-range misses in test firing were caused by wind variations along the trajectory. It was not the soldiers' fault, it was physics. And to correct it required not more firepower, but more understanding. That question arose in many laboratories. Could a small change, a small fix, save a platoon out there? Could the unmeasurable be turned into measurable data? Amid the bombing nights over Coventry, inside the RAF Ballistics Division's workshop, one engineer wrote in his notebook, "The enemy is not in front of us, it moves in the air between." That question hung in the smoke and gunfire, and from it, 2 paths began to form. One of craftsmanship, the quiet hands trying to repair things on the spot, and one of crisis-driven innovation, the minds cornered by the pressure of survival. Those 2 paths would meet, and when they did, they would change how the world understood precision. And in that silence, the wind kept killing. By dusk, the engineers were already improvising. War is not decided solely by generals at the map table, but by the grease-stained hands of those without high rank, unseen in victory photographs. Yet they are the reason the machine keeps running. According to the U.S. Army Service Forces report, 1,945, more than 60, 2% of recorded technical improvements during the war originated in the field, not in laboratories. From mechanics, transport drivers, and naval engineers to snipers, they all shared one trait: the ability to repair under desperation. On the European front, the field engineers of the Allied Technical Unit were often deployed alongside infantry divisions. They had no laboratories, only makeshift workshops, hammers, blowtorches, and notebooks. Whenever a tank was hit, they didn't wait for replacement parts, they welded it on the battlefield. According to the 3rd Armoured Division Maintenance Log, December 1944, up to 40, 1% of tanks were restored within 24 hours thanks to on-site repairs. That number reflects not just skill, but survival instinct. A steel plate welded at the wrong angle could kill a crew, yet if they didn't try, the unit would lose its mobility. In the bright flare of an oxyacetylene torch cutting through the night, they welded not only steel but also faith that by morning the machine would move again. In the United States, thousands of workers at Ford's Willow Run plant were fighting their own kind of war. Every day, the B-24 Liberator assembly line ran 24 hours, producing 1 bomber every 63 minutes. According to the War Production Board, 1944, the factory reached a peak output of 650 aircraft per month. That achievement came not from design genius, but from workers, mostly women, farmers, and craftsmen who learned to self-adjust tools, replace cutters, and align steel molds when engineers were absent. A 0.2 mm deviation in a mold could jam an engine gear, so they measured by feel and by sound. When the milling machine's tone changed, they stopped, listened, then adjusted by hand. A plant supervisor later recalled after the war, "We didn't have time to wait for instructions. We made the fix and hoped it held until dawn." On the logistics front, the drivers of the Red Ball Express, the massive supply route operating from the 25th of August 1944 to the 16th of November 1944, were another proof of creativity under pressure. Most were African American, working on bombed and muddy roads, carrying supplies from Normandy to the front lines at an average of 350 miles per trip. According to the U.S. Army Transportation Corps report, November 1944, they delivered over 5.6 million tons of supplies in just 82 days. To keep trucks running, they learned to filter oil with milk cans and fashion makeshift filters from shirt fabric. One driver wrote in his diary, "We didn't have engineers on the road, we were the engineers. They received no medals, but every successful delivery meant a unit survived." At sea, naval engineers at Scapa Flow, the Royal Navy's main base, faced a different kind of pressure. When ships returned from the Atlantic with hulls punctured, pipes ruptured, and sonar systems down, they had less than 36 hours to repair them before redeployment. According to the Royal Navy Engineering Office Memo 1943, repair crews restored over 80% of lightly damaged patrol ships right at port, without sending them to major docks. They cut steel in freezing winds, patching hulls with scrap metal. One engineer recalled at a 1962 memorial, "We worked in silence because the sea didn't care about our fatigue." And in that silence, they kept an entire fleet from breaking its back. But such creativity was not always welcome. Military systems favored discipline and procedure. A mechanic modifying a weapon outside of technical orders could be reprimanded or even punished for unauthorized modification. Yet in the field, survival mattered more than paperwork. According to the 8th Army Ordnance File 1943, at least 147 technical personnel were formally warned for altering equipment designs, but more than half of those changes were later recognized as valuable improvements. A British officer once wrote, "Regulations are designed for peace, but war rewrites them every night." The rigidity of the system forced many innovations to prove themselves. In Normandy, a motor lieutenant named Charles Mallory secretly attached windshields to Sherman tanks to keep dust from clogging the cockpit. After 3 weeks, air filter failures dropped 35%, and his modification was approved division-wide. Mallory was promoted, but he remembered the first time his superior caught him testing the idea. He said, "That's not in the manual," Mallory recalled. "I said, neither is dying in the desert." Survival pressure is a stronger catalyst than any command. In war, everyone becomes their own engineer. From a sniper in Stalingrad adjusting a PU scope to shoot through smoke, to a driver in the Ardennes burning old oil to restart his engine, all acted from the instinct to stay alive. An improvement didn't have to be perfect, only to work before dawn. And within that constraint, the spirit of craftsmanship met crisis-driven innovation, the skill of the hand, merging with the survival instinct of the human being. Years later, when historians asked about the secret to the Red Ball Express's success, a former driver laughed. "We didn't follow manuals. We followed fear." Fear, exhaustion, and hunger were the only curriculum they ever knew. Yet from them, thousands of small ideas were born, each one saving a life, each life preserving a formation. And somewhere between steel and sweat, the human factor became the true weapon. By dawn, the machines were learning from their makers. In war, engineering does not always come from laboratories, but from hands holding a hammer, a steel plate, and a sudden idea in the middle of gunfire. These field fixes are the art of survival measured in the scale of a single vehicle, a single rifle, a single supply post. According to the U.S. Army Ordnance Department report, 1944, more than 45% of tactically valuable innovations were deployed within 48 hours of a real-world malfunction. The structure of a small fix was always the same, compact, immediate, and effective. A replacement made from scrap metal could return a tank to battle. A rubber patch cut from a tire could seal an oil line. In the soldier's language, if it runs, it's fixed. In North Africa, the first Sherman tanks encountered an unexpected enemy, sand. The 9-cylinder radial engine, originally designed for temperate climates, quickly choked in desert dust storms. According to the British 8th Army Maintenance Log, November 1942, more than 37% of tanks suffered engine failure in the first month of the campaign because the air filters were too weak. American engineers sent improvement proposals back to Detroit, but delivery of replacement parts would take over 6 weeks. Meanwhile, mechanics at the front could not wait. They removed steel mesh from supply depots, used soldiers' bed frames, and layered parachute fabric between thin steel sheets to create temporary filters. The results were astonishing. Dust intake into combustion chambers dropped by 60%, and breakdown rates were cut nearly in half. That improvised solution was later standardized in the next design shipment to Tunisia. A short note in the report read, "Improvised solution, but it works. That's enough." Oh. A similar story unfolded with the P-40 Warhawk fighters of the U.S. Air Force. In the heat of Libya and Egypt, the Allison V-1710 engines often overheated. Instead of waiting for parts, the maintenance team of the 57th Fighter Group decided to alter the radiator fin angle from 35 degrees to 42 degrees, redirecting airflow into the cooling bay. According to the 9th Air Force Engineering Summary, February 1943, by after the modification, average engine temperature dropped by 11 degrees Celsius, and aircraft lifespan increased by 23 flight hours. All achieved with a protractor, a few bolts, and one bold midnight decision. In Stalingrad, where icy winds blew through shattered walls, Soviet snipers faced a problem few anticipated: sight drift. The PU scope, calibrated at the Izhevsk factory under standard conditions, was misaligned at negative 25 degrees Celsius when metal contraction altered its 0 point by several thousandths of an inch. That was enough for a bullet to miss an enemy's head by inches, a fatal error in sniping. According to the Soviet Sniper Division Manual 1943, many units had to file down joints or insert wooden spacers beneath the scope mounts. One sniper wrote in his diary, "I had no tools, only a knife, but the scope must see what I see." Post-war tests confirmed that inserting a 0.8 mm wooden shim completely corrected the error, and the method became an official part of Soviet sniper training doctrine. What gave these small fixes their value was the balance between intuition and data. A skilled mechanic didn't need to understand thermodynamics, but he knew by sound what right felt like. A sniper didn't need aerodynamic formulas. He could read the wind by the way smoke moved. According to the U.S. Army Field Engineering Guide 1944, nearly 70% of field repair decisions were made by experience rather than by technical manuals. When survival time is measured in minutes, instinct becomes science. The impact of those microscopic adjustments spread on a macroscopic scale. One tank working for an extra day meant the entire company gained one more battle of support. One aircraft lasting a few more flight hours could protect another supply convoy. According to the Combined Chiefs of Staff Summary No. 1149, field modifications increased overall equipment readiness across the North African front by 15% in 1943. That figure equaled adding 2 mechanized divisions without producing a single new machine. Amid the dry reports, there sometimes appeared small pencil notes scribbled in the margins. "Keep this trick. It works in the sand. Don't tell HQ yet. They'll ask for paperwork." Those short lines were the soul of survival engineering, where a soldier turned every tool into part of his body, and every malfunction into a deeper understanding of war. A mechanic from the 8th Army recalled at a veteran gathering in 1967, "We didn't fix tanks. We fixed the time. Every weld gave us one more sunrise." As the war went on, many improvised ideas were copied, refined, and then formalized as technical standards. Sherman's homemade filter was adopted by Ford Motor Company in the M4A3 version produced in mid-1943. The altered radiator fin angle of the P-40 was incorporated into the P-51B design. The wooden shims under PU scopes were codified in the 1944 Red Army Sniper Manual. What began with hammers and pliers found its way into military textbooks. This was the quiet part of the story where war was seen not through bayonets or maps, but through the hands of craftsmen. There was no smoke or shouting, only the sound of metal striking metal, the smell of oil, and the flicker of weld light across steel. A 1944 British Pathé documentary showed a group of engineers repairing a tank at night. No music, no narration, only the clang of hammers and the whistling wind. They worked for 17 hours straight, and when the treads finally turned, a young soldier smiled faintly, then fell asleep on the ground. That image, more than any medal, defined the spirit of the field fix. And in that glow of steel and sweat, survival became an art. By midnight, the desert had learned to breathe with machines. War is the enemy of hesitation. When every decision must be proven in blood, belief gradually yields to data. The field-borne innovations from makeshift dust filters to altered radiator fins now had to pass a new trial, proof by numbers. According to the U.S. War Department Memorandum, January 1943, the process of evaluating battlefield innovations was standardized across all branches, requiring at least 5 repeat trials with an allowable error margin below 10%. From that moment, war entered an era in which experience alone was no longer enough. Evidence was required. In the United States, Ardennes Proving Ground in Maryland became the epicenter of the data revolution. Each day, over 400 engineers and ballistic specialists worked continuously, recording every trajectory, muzzle velocity, angular deviation, and propellant burn time. According to the Ardennes Ballistics Division report, 1,944, every new artillery piece underwent 1,200 test firings before mass production approval. From that mountain of notes emerged not only patterns, but also the discovery of errors introduced by human behavior. An engineer named Howard Jensen recalled in a 1951 interview, "We stopped guessing. Guessing kills." In Britain, the Shoeburyness testing range on the Thames estuary served a similar role. It was where every idea from designers and field engineers had to be verified. According to the Royal Ordnance Evaluation Summary, 1942, more than 300 proposals were submitted monthly from the North African front, with fewer than 8% approved after validation. Most failed for lack of demonstrated stability. A mechanic from Tobruk once wrote in a letter, "Our fix worked once. That wasn't enough for London." Yet that brutal filtering process forged the foundation of modern technical standards. Everything from gun elevation angles to maintenance frequency had to come with data attached. Testing criteria were formalized into 3 pillars: repeatability, acceptable deviation, and reproducibility across environments. According to the Allied Technical Committee Guidelines 1943, if a field innovation could not be replicated at 2 different sites, it was deemed invalid. The rule sounded dry, but it marked a turning point. It transformed the art of improvisation into a measurable science. Engineers began using the term replicability as a metric of worth. An innovation was no longer a stroke of luck, it was a reproducible model. Time, however, was the enemy of every process. As combat intensified, procedure often had to fold. According to the U.S. Navy Bureau of Ordnance Report, June 1943, the Proximity Fuse Project, a radio-triggered detonation system, had its testing cycle shortened from 24 months to 6 months. Under normal conditions, that would have been reckless. In wartime, it saved thousands of lives. By the end of 1944, over 22 million units of the proximity fuse had been produced, and according to the 9th Air Force, the success rate of anti-aircraft fire against German planes increased by 4.2 times. A diary entry dated December 18 read, "The fuse works. It doesn't ask for permission." That line became the spirit of the age data above ritual. The urgency of the crisis legalized many innovations almost instantly. When a team of engineers at Wright Field tested lightweight alloy wings for the P-47, the prototype cleared trials in just 72 hours. According to the Army Air Force's Material Command, 1944, the alloy increased strength by 18% while reducing wing weight by 52 pounds and was approved for production the same month. Processes that once took years were compressed into weeks or days, as long as the numbers were clear. Time became capital, and data became the language of authority. At Ardennes, military statisticians for the first time applied error charts and analysis of variance to ballistic research. According to the Statistical Research Group, Columbia University, 1945, the first linear regression model was used to predict 105 mm shell deviation based on humidity and wind direction. The result reduced ammunition expenditure by 22% for the same accuracy. This marked the birth of operational research, the science of operations which would later underpin modern logistics management. Meanwhile, at Ardennes, Royal Navy engineers developed a method to record ship hull vibrations using early piezoelectric sensors. According to Admiralty Engineering Note number 227, 1944, they detected oscillations of 7-9 Hz when vessels ran at 18 knots, leading to recommendations to reinforce bow frames. Measurement replaced intuition and prevented dozens of hull fractures the following year. One young engineer wrote in his notes, "Numbers don't flinch when shells fall." The new process also reshaped power structures within the military. Once, rank decided right and wrong. After 1943, data tables began to speak louder than insignia. A sergeant could overturn a colonel's opinion if the numbers supported it. According to the Combined Chiefs of Staff Proceedings, March 1945, over 32% of successful technical recommendations originated from lower-ranking officers. A historian later called it democratization by data. When numbers spoke, hierarchy went silent. As a result, war gradually escaped the fog of conjecture. Instead of saying, "I think," people began to say, "the data shows." Trust shifted from instinct to charts, from intuition to statistics. The smoke-filled proving grounds and hurried experiments taught humanity one simple lesson: in chaos, only numbers remain calm. And under that discipline of data, chaos found its order. By dawn, the generals were learning to listen to the graphs. War does not wait. Every passing hour means lost ground, lost lives, and lost chances to survive. Under that pressure, innovation ceased to be a concept and became an instinct. According to the Combined Production Committee Report, 1943, more than 78% of major technical innovations in World War II emerged not from planned research but from emergencies, moments where failure meant extinction. Every great invention began in deadlock, where reason was forced to its limits and fear became the fuel of intellect. In 1942, after a devastating defeat in North Africa, the Allies faced a fatal problem: fuel. Tankers were being sunk by U-boats along the supply routes, and overland transport could not meet the immense demand. Out of this crisis came Project Pluto, pipeline under the ocean, a seemingly insane idea, to run fuel pipelines beneath the English Channel to supply the Normandy invasion. According to the British Petroleum War Division report, 1944, the project advanced at unprecedented speed. Within 10 months, over 500 miles of pipe were laid, pumping 1 million gallons per day across the channel. One participating engineer recalled, "We didn't have a choice. Either the pipe worked or the invasion failed." Under enemy fire and with mines scattered across the seabed, colossal steel coils were unwound into the sea, linking Britain to France and turning the ocean into the bloodstream of logistics. At the same time, across the Atlantic, the United States was fighting an enemy named time. Each Liberty ship took 230 days to build by traditional riveting methods, far too long for a war of attrition. With ships being sunk faster than they could be launched, the U.S. Navy turned to welding. According to the U.S. Maritime Commission Summary, 1943, the new technique reduced construction time to 42 days, and later to a record 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes for the SS Robert E. Peary. It was an industrial leap not just in technique but in philosophy. If it can float, it can fight. Over 2,710 Liberty ships were launched, carrying millions of tons of supplies to Europe. A minor welding error could split a hull in two, and hundreds of sailors paid that price. But delay was deadlier. They accepted risk because risk was safer than failure. In the laboratories of Johns Hopkins, another team of engineers was gambling with time. They were developing the proximity fuse, a radio-triggered shell detonator that exploded when near a target. According to the U.S. Navy Bureau of Ordnance Report, 1943, testing time was cut from 2 years to 6 months, despite shortages of materials and data. Every shell could detonate prematurely, killing its creators. Yet they pressed on. The result? In December 1944, when Patton's Third Army was attacked by German aircraft over the Ardennes, Shells equipped with the proximity fuse destroyed 77% of targets within 2 minutes. General Eisenhower later wrote, "It saved London. It shortened the war." All of these races shared one mechanism: crisis, triggered creativity. When survival was at stake, systems evolved instantly. According to the War Production Board, 1944, any project with data proving immediate effectiveness was moved straight from testing to mass production without normal approval cycles. Speed became law. Ford's Willow Run plants ran 24 hours a day. Workers rotated 10-hour shifts, producing one B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. When the British Ministry of Defence confirmed the efficiency of the chain-home radar network, they built 53 stations in 90 days. The entire world stretched itself to the limit of production capacity. But speed was a double-edged sword. In Liberty shipyards, more than 1,500 localized explosions caused by faulty welds were recorded in 1943. A wounded engineer wrote in a medical report, "We built too fast, and sometimes the steel reminded us." Yet no one stopped. They knew that every day of delay meant hundreds of soldiers dying offshore for lack of ammunition or fuel. According to the U.S. Office of War Information, 1944, the war turned human beings into decision engines, fast, precise, and forbidden to doubt. That urgency seeped into command thinking as well. Previously, tactical changes required multiple levels of approval. After 1943, field units were allowed to alter strategy within 24 hours if data supported the change. According to the Allied Operations Directive, September 1943, reconnaissance groups in Italy were authorized to adjust artillery targeting immediately after receiving Spitfire flight reports. A British officer remarked in a post-war meeting, "The battlefield was no longer waiting for London. In that rush, orders became reflex and data became command. Every push beyond limits was a gamble. A single error in an alloy formula could crack a ship's hull mid-ocean. A miscalculation in radar systems could expose an entire air wing. But those involved understood that doing nothing was far more dangerous." According to the Admiralty Technical Office Bulletin, 1944, merchant ship losses dropped by 43% after Pluto and radar networks went operational. They had chosen the right risk. Amid those pages of figures, there were still moments of silence. A young engineer at Aberdeen wrote in his diary, "We work 16 hours a day. We test, we fail, we start again. We sleep beside the sound of explosions. Pressure didn't destroy them, it refined them. Crisis forged a generation of engineers unafraid of failure, because failure was the first step towards success." By the end of 1945, when the smoke had cleared, more than 125,000 inventions and improvements were patented across the Allied nations, from heat-resistant bolts to radar-guided navigation systems. Each one was a fragment of the greatest creative surge of the 20th century. Under bombardment, humanity rediscovered its instinct to invent. And under fire, innovation became the only form of survival. By dawn, invention had replaced fear. The improvised battlefield innovations, once dismissed as temporary fixes, ultimately became the forces that turned the tide. Every invention born of panic, every improvement forged under fire, reshaped the way the world waged war. According to the Combined Chiefs of Staff Report, June 1945, the 4 greatest technical turning points of the Allied forces' proximity fuse, Willow Run, Liberty Ship, and Red Ball Express were all described as improvised solutions turned strategic advantages. When soldiers, workers, and engineers met in crisis, the result was no longer repair, it was revolution. The proximity fuse stood as the clearest proof of scientific ingenuity under fire. According to the U.S. Navy Bureau of Ordnance Report, 1944, the fuse used a radio sensor that detonated within a 70-foot radius, raising the hit rate on aerial targets from 7% to 32%, with average effectiveness quadrupling by the end of 1945. During the Ardennes campaign, according to the 9th Air Force operational record, January 1945, more than 2,700 German aircraft were shot down or disabled in just 2 weeks. A British officer recorded, "For the first time, we were shooting the sky, not the ground." By March 1945, the Luftwaffe had virtually vanished from Western Europe's skies. On the ground, Willow Run in Michigan proved that speed was a weapon. According to the War Production Board, 1944, Ford's B-24 Liberator assembly line reached 650 aircraft per month, one plane every 63 minutes. More than 40,000 workers, over half of them women, operated 2,700 standardized tasks that turned steel and aluminum into 4-engine bombers. A Ford engineer later said, "We measured time in rivets." According to the U.S. Army Air Force's Statistical Digest, 1945, quote, "The production surge increased long-range bombing missions by 46% in 1944 alone." Willow Run didn't just build planes, it built the rhythm of victory. At sea, the Liberty ship phenomenon embodied American industrial might. According to the U.S. Maritime Commission Annual Report, 1944, the switch from riveting to welding reduced shipbuilding time from 230 days to 42 days, with the record held by the SS Robert E. Peary completed in 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. In 4 years, over 2,710 Liberty ships were launched, carrying 7 million tons of cargo across the Atlantic. One shipyard worker wrote, "We built them faster than they could sink them." Each vessel was a lifeline, keeping the Normandy campaign flowing. The Red Ball Express was a monument to human endurance. According to the U.S. Army Transportation Corps report, November 1944, the convoy network deployed 6,000 trucks, with 75% of its drivers, African American, operating 24/7 for 82 days, and delivering more than 5.6 million tons of supplies. They repaired trucks at night, used milk cans as oil filters, and tore shirts to make makeshift sieves. One driver recalled, "The engines sounded like prayers. It was they who kept Patton's tanks fueled for the breakthrough to Bastogne, opening the path to victory at the Battle of the Bulge." The strategic effects of these 4 innovations rippled outward like waves. The proximity fuse commanded the skies. Willow Run and Liberty ships expanded the supply arteries. Red Ball Express sustained the heartbeat of the Army on land. According to the Combined Allied Logistics Assessment, August 1945, the overall operational capacity of the Allied forces increased 3.4 times compared to 1942, while logistics manpower rose only 40%. Engineering triumphed over tactics, and data triumphed over intuition. Small fixes, replicated thousands of times, built an industrial war machine where speed and creativity redefined the meaning of strength. When the guns finally fell silent, the workers, drivers, engineers, and snipers returned home with hands darkened by oil and flame. A British witness at Shoeburyness said at the 1947 commemoration, "It wasn't genius, it was survival." And with those small fixes, the war itself was re-engineered. By morning, the machines had outlasted the men who built them. When the gunpowder smoke cleared, what remained was not only victory, but the legacy of those who turned despair into invention. From the engineers at Aberdeen to the mechanics in the North African desert, from the workers at Willow Run to the drivers of the Red Ball Express, they all proved that small ideas can change the world if given a system large enough to let them grow. According to the U.S. War Department Post-War Analysis, 1946, more than 2% of military technologies later applied in peacetime originated from field innovations. The modern military R&D process, with its rapid test cycles and provisional approvals, was the direct descendant of that wartime spirit. The organizational lessons of World War II remain intact. Innovation does not come from rank, but from the right to experiment. After 1945, many Western militaries established field innovation unit spaces where soldiers could submit ideas, without passing through the traditional chain of command. According to the British Defence R&D Review, 1951, these groups produced more than 400 technical improvements in the first post-war decade, ranging from thermal rangefinders to portable water filtration systems. When ideas were allowed to move faster than orders, organizations became agile, and modern warfare entered the era of adaptive engineering. But every innovation has two faces. Each technology that saves lives can also take them more efficiently. The proximity fuse, once a symbol of engineering brilliance, was later used in nuclear artillery. According to the International Ordnance Ethics Report, 1952, more than 70% of scientists involved in the project felt ethical conflict. The boundary between invention and destruction lies in intention. That is the price of progress, the kind of progress that forces humanity to guard itself against itself. The academic legacy of that era was also preserved. According to the U.S. Military Engineering Academy Course Outline, 1956, the course Rapid Prototyping Under Stress was added to the formal curriculum, emphasizing decision-making under pressure and design within constraints. From then on, the term field-tested became a mark of credibility for every military technology. When the old soldiers told their stories, what they remembered was not victory, but the moment they dared to try something no one had done before. A mechanic from Scapa Flow said at a 1958 memorial, "We didn't invent for glory, we invented because we were afraid." And perhaps that is the final truth of all creation. It does not arise from genius in a laboratory, but from oil-stained hands and minds that fear failure, fear loss, and thus are driven to invent. And in that fear, humanity found its genius. Thank you for accompanying us through this story. We are committed to continuing to bring you the finest content, recreating history's most authentic and moving moments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more legendary battles ahead.